Thanks so much for sharing your garden with us. And right now, one of my favorite guests on Central Texas Gardeners making a repeat appearance, Greg Grant, drove all the way over from East Texas to be with us today. Greg, it's great to see you again.
Great to be here.
We're going to be talking about vegetable planting and your new book, which is Texas Fruit and Vegetable Gardening. Congratulations on that.
Thank you very much.
It's a great resource, and we're going to just try to give people an overview of what's in the book and then talk about things that should be on people's calendars this time of year, because we're getting pretty darn close to springtime here in Central Texas.
Absolutely.
So let's start off by talking about what you were trying to include in the book. There are lots of different things there, but in terms of different categories, for example, there's a lot of information about planting seeds, right?
Absolutely. Of course, you can't really garden, particularly vegetable garden, without knowing something about germination of seeds. So you pretty much have to start, not all vegetable plants, but a lot of them from seed, particularly some of the larger vegetables. And even if you don't, everybody needs to know where plants come from.
Exactly.
And they all start from a seed, either in your garden or at a nursery or a greenhouse. So it's very important people understand that process.
And I think there's a special pleasure in growing a plant from seed compared to buying one in the nursery.
Absolutely. I've been a seed saver and collector since I was a child. And so as with anything I write, you pretty much, I don't really do a poll of what people want to hear. So I've got this stuff in my head and it comes out, and I've got, both my parents were teachers, and so it's pretty much the story of my life and what I thought I needed to know when I got into vegetable gardening, and then I turn around and share that with other folks, and seeds are pretty much where I started, so I think that's where they need to start too.
Well, I think that's one of the things that sets this book apart is your personality. It does come through in a lot of different ways in the book, and that's one of the charms of buying a book written by Greg Grant, is it's not just going to be the how-to kind of information. There's going to be some, let's say, local flavor involved.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's what you get when it comes out of my head, and that's the only way I can write. So.
Well, it comes with the territory, I think, out there in East Texas.
Absolutely.
So another thing that you spent some time on is talking about soil types.
Of course, Texas is a big state, and the soil is extremely variable. And I'm one of the few people in the industry that's lived in the different areas with the different soil types. So you've got people that lived in East Texas all their life, and they can tell you about sandy, acid soils. And you've got people that spent their whole life in black caliche gumbo, and they can tell you all about that. Well, I loved gardening, and I've jumped at every job offer that ever came my way. So I've literally worked from extremely acid to extremely alkaline, from North Texas to South Texas. And so I've got a unique background to be able to understand those soil types, and it makes a huge difference in vegetable gardening, as I found out when I went to school at College Station and tried to garden some black clay that I wasn't used to, and none of my crops came up. I mean, I literally entombed the seed, and they graded us on it. And so first round of grades, there's Greg, the lifetime gardener, with an F, because there's nothing in my garden. And I learned pretty quick, different soils need different techniques to grow things. And so it's the first thing you got to find out before you even put a seed in the ground is, what kind of soil do I have? Because it determines what you're going to grow and how deep you're going to plant it.
You also spend time talking about container gardening, which is increasingly popular in our more urban lifestyles.
I love containers, and I've had gobs of containers in my life. And of course, love to go to the north in Europe and see beautiful containers, but it's real tricky in Texas, because when you raise up a plant and limit the root ball and the size of the soil, they dry out so much quicker. And so you have to know ahead of time. It looks cute, but main thing in Texas, you've got to think about, how am I going to keep that thing watered, which can sometimes be as much as twice a day, and a lot of people aren't willing to do that. So some real specific information people need to know on container gardening.
When it gets up to 110 degrees, as it is routinely now in Austin, watering twice a day sometimes is a reality in a container garden. So buyer beware on that one. Just a good heads up, though. One thing that is really cool in the book is detailed information about nutrient deficiencies. And this is something where you can really have a diagnostic tool with you when you walk out into the garden.
To be honest, it looks good when you flash all the nutrients up there and describe the deficiency symptoms, but most of the time in the vegetable gardening world, the main culprit is a lack of nitrogen, because vegetables are heavy feeders. It's a lot to ask of a plant to not only grow but produce lots of stuff to feed us, and so it's important to know all those others, but about 93% of the time people are going to be running into nitrogen deficiency. So if I can just get them to learn that one, they're pretty much there.
Okay, well, I'm going to remember that at my garden show. I'm just going to say that's going to be my default
Greg
answer.
said nitrogen.
Right. Absolutely. They're also included in the book. This is where I think more of your personality comes through. Is there a lot of recipes?
I love to eat, and I like to cook. My mom liked to cook. My grandmothers liked to cook, and so that's sort of passed down through the family. But to me, the reason we grow vegetables is to eat them. And there are a lot of people out there, and because there's nothing wrong with eating a vegetable just raw right off the plant. That's what we should be doing anyway. But a lot of people don't like vegetables because you just boil in a pot of water and throw it on somebody's plate. And I've got a lot of nephews that refuse to eat vegetables. Well, you got to think of some creative ways to make things look good, taste good, and so a few tricks of the trade throughout history of what had a lot of people eating vegetables. And Austin may be different. There's some educated folks in Austin that know just a good nutritious vegetable is fine without any adulteration. But lots of the world out there that's used to high fructose sugar flowing through their veins. I mean, or green slop on a plate out of a can with Popeye's picture on there. And, recipes are important.
Yeah, well, all
even
for
simple
that.
ones.
Yeah, well, and simpler the better usually.
Absolutely.
Yeah, just roasting them is my favorite thing to do now. Okay, so we're at the time of year, as I said at the beginning of the interview, where people are thinking about that spring garden. They should be preparing soil, if nothing else, at this point. But your book has lots of great detailed information about the different kinds of plants you grow in the garden, and for each plant you have specifics about when do you plant it, where do you plant it, the care and harvest of the plant, and also little tips about additional information on which varieties do best in our region. So what are you going to be planting this spring? What are your favorite things?
Well, the important thing to get out of the way first is what is spring. The rest of the world, our calendar doesn't line up with the rest of the world's gardening calendar, and a lot of beginning gardeners don't know what to plant during what season. So most people, I'd say 75% of the gardening world does a spring garden. A lot of people don't garden in the summer. A lot of people don't garden in the fall. Almost nobody gardens in the winter, although we can garden year-round here.
Right.
But they jump out there in the springtime and they try to grow all the things that they like. Well, unless it fits that season, you're not going to be successful. And so when you're starting out with an early spring garden, February, March, still got a chance of frost.
Right.
You can't go out there with peppers and tomatoes, and so those are out. We're looking at cool season plants that can tolerate a frost. And so it's pretty much what we have for spring conditions where we grow our spring crops. That's what a lot of the rest of the world is going to have for their mid-spring and summer crops. So we're actually going in with things like lettuce and broccoli and cauliflower and turnip greens, mustard, kale, all those plants that have built-in antifreeze that love cool weathers that can take frosty nights. Right. Same plants that we planted in the fall going into winter.
It's like a second fall garden.
So we get 2 fall gardens in Texas. We get 2 spring gardens in Texas. And by spring, I'm talking later is when we're after frost. So you can do tomatoes and peppers in spring. You do tomatoes and peppers again in the fall. And then we get 1 summer garden that the rest of the world's not familiar with, when we can do things like peas and okra that have to take inferno for heat. So we literally have 3 different types of crops and 5 different seasons too that we get to duplicate. And a lot of people try to cram all that into 1 spring garden, and it just doesn't work. And so what's coming up now are cool season crops that can tolerate frost. A lot of greens, a lot of good nutritious stuff. So you need
let's just take one example and kind of filter it through the way you do it in the book. So let's take a lettuce, which is real popular to grow this time of year.
Right. Of course, you have all different kinds of lettuce now. Everybody grew up just eating iceberg lettuce, and now we have these amazing array of different types of lettuce, particularly leaf lettuces. You've got everything from green to burgundy to spotted to striped.
You're right.
Real important thing to know is lettuce likes cool weather. So if you're planting it with your tomatoes and peppers in April, you're probably too late. So it's got to be planted, February, March, maybe at the latest. It's also important to know the lettuce has to have light to germinate. So if you make little trenches and put your little lettuce seed in there and cover them up like you're planting beans, it's not going to come up. There are certain seeds that have to have light to germinate. Lettuce is one of them. So you cultivate a perfect little cushy bed, and you literally just sprinkle them on there, and maybe scratch them in just a little bit, but you're not planting seed. You're just basically like sprinkling poppy seed on a roll. And so that's and of course they're delicate little plants, and you need a weed-free garden, because your weeds are all going to come up at the same time. And so having some nice clean compost, something that doesn't have a lot of weeds in there, and knowing the difference, and just a matter of getting them going. And then all of these cool season crops, particularly the leafy greens, are real heavy feeders, and so you've got to do some fertilizing not only while they're growing, but before. Otherwise, you're going to have stunted little tiny lettuce plants. And, there's just not a lot to eat on little tiny lettuce leaves, and so we want lots of lettuce and big salads and frequent salads, and that means feed them so they can feed us. So.
Okay, so that's kind of in a nutshell. In a condensed version, what you just said is what people can experience when they get the book, and they'll go through for all the different crops.
Absolutely,
all the different
we break
basic
each one
information.
down to. My mom was a first grade teacher, and I when I first started working for the Extension Service with Dr. Parsons, my mentor, I chose to work with beginning gardeners. When I found out 50% of the world didn't garden, well, I said, why? And they're missing out. So I'd much rather work with the people that they don't know anything about it, and so a step-by-step ABC approach is good. So there are good gardeners out there that could have written this book, so they don't need that information, but a lot of them don't know the basics, and we tried to make it simple for them.
I'm more and more convinced that we're all beginning gardeners.
Well, that's true. I've been doing it my whole life, and every year there's giant mistakes, and I'm thinking, why didn't you know that? But there's no way to know it all, and that's why gardeners live to be 107, because you got something new to learn every day.
Well, thank you for being our guest again on Central Texas Gardener.
Glad to be here.
Congratulations on the book.
Appreciate you.
All right, thank you. And coming up next is our friend Daphne.